I better learn to show consideration.
So we got Sean Pica here, who has a very interesting story, to say the least. Are there any questions I can't ask?
No.
No, okay. So Sean, just really quick, is from Long Island. You were incarcerated for 16 years, rightfully convicted.
Yep.
And Jeff Deskovic is the George Clooney of exonerees. What's interesting here is that we're wrongfully convicted, rightfully convicted. How did you guys meet? How do you know each other?
Oh, our paths crossed while incarcerated.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Jeff actually was on the waiting list for the Hudson program when he was exonerated.
So you knew each other from prison, and you knew him as a guy who obviously wasn't wrongly convicted. Knew he committed murder, right?
No.
Oh, you didn't know?
No.
Nobody says anything in prison?
People don't talk about their crimes in prison.
Yeah, but
in
eventually
general.
people find out.
It's not polite to ask. People don't volunteer. The most that happens is a surface level conversation, and somebody might make a non-committal response. They might, oh, I've got a body.
Did you know he was wrongly convicted?
I did not know, but I will say, folks aren't running around saying I'm wrongfully convicted.
Right.
There have been only a handful of guys that I've known over the years that have even openly discussed feeling like they've been wrongfully convicted. And Jeffrey being exonerated has not only changed the direction of his life, but he didn't leave that place and just move on. He has continued to stay involved with other organizations that work in the prison, as well as other men fighting their cases.
Which I give him, you know, my hat off to him every day. You met, and I know you hang around with a few people that actually did crimes.
Sure, yes, I am.
And so now that Sean is here, is there sometimes that you find a common distinction? Is there a common thread through all of them that they might or might not have versus somebody who's been wrongly convicted versus rightfully convicted?
Look, each person's an individual. That having been said, there are generalities that run through before exonerated versus people who are rightfully convicted but are advocates. Now, it feels totally different to me.
So what are those distinctions?
Well, people that were rightfully convicted, they're more matter of fact and upfront and transparent. With the formerly wrongfully imprisoned people, there's a lot more ambiguity and, you know, hard to make decisions, not as committal.
Right.
But I think that has to do with, you know, someone rightfully imprisoned. I mean, for the most part, you know how much time you're going to do. And someone wrongfully in prison has no clue.
Well, he didn't know how much time because you got 8 to 24 years, so that could have been a large...
But he knew at a minimum, right, unless something happened for him in court, then in general...
He knew at a minimum, but a minimum is, going from 8 to 24, that's a big leap. So he doesn't know really...
The difference, too, is I'm sentenced to 24 years, I go into prison, I know I'm eligible for release after 8, but then I'm just there serving my time. Right. I get my prison job, I kind of try to get into the scene. Someone that's wrongfully convicted spends every waking moment fighting his case, finding resources. Those 16 years are hell compared to the 16 years that I served that, quite frankly, I served the time and went home. It's really two different sentences.
On some level, we can say that you versus Jeff, you had a little bit more of a stability in prison. Oddly enough, because you knew I'm there, and this guy had no stability because he's thinking like every day he's going to think, oh, any day I got to get out of here.
Even to the very day
turns from months to years to...
On the day you were even exonerated, you didn't even know that was going to be the day. You finally, hey, they call your name, you're leaving that day.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Then I'm sitting there waiting in the bullpen area. My lawyer's supposed to show up and confirm for me everything is still on, and he never shows up. So now I'm thinking something happened. I always had in the back of my mind, I was always worried that somebody was going to discover what I was incarcerated for. Because I was there for a sex offense, you know, murder, but a rape with it. Now, there was no sex offense in your case.
Your friend Cheryl was getting abused by her father when she was 16 years old, and he threatened that he would start abusing her sister, who was 8 years old, and she wanted to prevent that from happening. And so she has a conversation with you and basically hired you to kill her father for your asking price of $1,000, which I found to be a bit cheap. You could have went a little higher.
I think I could have moved that.
You come up to his driveway early morning before he's going to work. You pump 5 bullets into the guy, mission completed. And the case created a media sensation, is that correct? Spawning, I think, a few books and an ABC TV movie, right? Okay. So that is basically Sean's introduction. The interesting part is that you killed somebody that was doing these heinous things to your friend Cheryl, and you're in for rape. If you knew about Jeff, on some level, you might have received him in a very different way. Is that correct?
I was doing just the opposite. I went to prison for essentially judging somebody. When I got there and got thrown into a world that I didn't know existed, for essentially 24 years, I went into prison sentenced to more time than I was alive. I immediately shifted gears and never did that again. I actually spent a lot of time with guys that no one else would hang out with because they had a case that was deemed unfavorable, or breaking a lot of the unwritten prison rules that got me in a lot of hot water over those 16 years.
Right, but there was a lot of anger in you, right?
I would say in the beginning.
I mean, just from what I read.
Yeah. I was in and out of solitary
When you say
confinement.
beginning, the first 7, 8 years?
No, I would say the first 25 months. The first couple years, I was in and out of solitary confinement. I was getting into trouble. I wasn't listening. I literally turned my life around and started going to school, getting involved with programming. I changed my life.
Was it just you or you had siblings?
I had 4 brothers. I'm one of 5. My mom and dad are retired New York City cops.
Big family.
Good neighborhood, good family, never been in trouble before.
Your mom and dad were both cops.
Yep.
So was there love in the family? I mean, was there...
I came from a great home, a great neighborhood. I was not supposed to be that kid.
Well, you say you came from a great home, but then I also read that you had a father and you had a stepfather.
Yeah. Mom and dad split and both remarried.
How old were you when they split?
I was 8 when my dad left.
Did that affect you?
Well, I think that affects everybody.
Yeah, sure. Well, we're not qualifying it. It affected you in
yeah.
this case, right?
Yeah.
In what way? How did you lash out? Did you...
I think for me, because Mom was left taking care of me and my brothers.
You felt resentment.
Yeah, you definitely...
You
resentment.
begrudged your father.
Yeah, sure.
Right, right. And then your stepfather comes into play.
Yeah. He was a bit of a jerk.
He was a bit of a jerk, right.
Yeah.
In the beginning, was he a jerk, or did he eventually become a jerk?
I think he was a bit of a jerk the whole time.
Oh, really? Wow, no kidding.
His jerkness
Right.
increased.
Did you tell, I would imagine as an 8-year-old child, your mom brings, what's your stepfather's name?
Jim.
Jim. He brings Jim home. You're kind of getting some bad energy, some jerk energy from him. Did you pull your mom off and say, hey, what's going on? Can you do any better than this guy? I got to deal with this asshole?
What, as a kid, I wasn't ready for that conversation.
Oh, you weren't. So were you shy and withdrawn as a kid?
Yeah, I was
All your
pretty
siblings or just you?
I think I was probably one of the more introverted of the brothers. Yeah.
Right. Were you the youngest?
Middle.
Middle.
Yeah.
Okay. And why do you think you were more introverted of the brothers?
I don't know. I never really thought about it.
Yeah.
I mean, we were all kind of built very differently.
Built differently.
Yeah, we look different,
Sure,
act different.
wired differently,
Yeah.
different DNA. But all from the same parents.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you said it was pretty Leave It to Beaver lifestyle kind of loving. But on the other hand, now you're telling me that
Well, I would say, too, that
stepdad came in.
I think as I was growing up in Long Island, and good neighborhood, just an incredible growing up experience. I might have thought that I was poor. I might have thought that I had things a little rough. I might have thought that we weren't living as well as other folks. And then I got to prison, and
you realized, well,
I didn't know what that definition was. Like I was.
Why'd you think you were poor, though? I mean, two cops in a family, they make a fairly, at least a middle-class family.
Some of my friends just had a lot more than I
see.
did.
Right.
So you kind of.
So you were looking over your shoulder.
I didn't know what to gauge it by as a kid,
You had a lot of friends when you were a kid?
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to read, this is from Newsday. This is back in 2003, written by a gentleman by the name of Andrew Smith. Sean was 5 when his father left his mother for the first time. The Picas reconciled, but were finally divorced when Sean was 9. His mother remarried, and Sean liked his stepfather, it says here, but there was a dark side. The man beat his mother and then disappeared after 3 years. Sean became a silent, angry kid seeking acceptance, and he took his search to the streets for a life lived too fast, too early. He ran with a bad crowd. He turned to burglary, breaking into neighborhood homes. He turned to cocaine, and then he turned to murder. And then you claim, this is a quote, though I loved my father, I was angry at him for leaving, then my stepfather leaving. What has been suggested is that maybe I used that anger against my own father, now against my friend's father. Maybe there was more to that I understood.
You look back now, I'm about to be 50, and you look back to things you did as a 14, 15-year-old and not understanding the depth of which some of those decisions were made. I mean, we're taking these college classes and we're taking psychology and behavioral science and sociology. You start to think about the decisions you made when you were younger and how some of those came to play.
Right. You know, it's funny because I always think about the fact that our childhood shapes a large part of our childhood. You know, could be our DNA, it could be what our parents gave us, and I think it's also environmental.
Yeah.
You know, your friends, whatever. I wonder if you had a better family life, maybe if you didn't encounter all these things with your stepfather.
Yeah.
He was abusive to your mom. Physically abusive?
Yeah.
Physically abusive. Did you at some point, you didn't turn to him and start getting physical?
I was 2 inches shorter. I weighed 118 pounds
Right.
when I got arrested. I mean, I was a pretty small kid.
Right. And did he ever physically abuse you?
Yeah.
He
Me
did.
and my brothers, yeah.
All of them?
Yeah.
Right. And then at some point your mom got smart. 3 years later she booted him out?
No, he left.
Oh, he left. He left. Oh, I see. Okay. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah.
I wasn't.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, on the one hand, you know, people look at somebody, oh, he took somebody's life, right?
Yeah.
And that's a terrible thing. You've admitted that. On the flip side, I read this, I'm not justifying what you did at all, but I read this and I say, you know, on some level, this could happen to anyone. I'm not saying it would happen to anyone. I'm saying it could. It's possible.
Yeah.
I get the sense that you were raised in a sense of there was a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Pressure of like at 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever. Will my stepdad hit my mom tonight? Will he take it out on me? Will he take it out on my brothers? You guys were all close, right?
Yeah,
Even though
still
you were
are.
different, and you
Yep.
still are. Has this all played on you throughout the years?
Sure. I mean, I even just think about the timing of it. Talking with my friend Cheryl during homeroom that we just happened to have this, you know, last name start with the same initial, and having this
Yeah.
piece in the news about someone that one of the teachers that hired someone to kill her father.
Yeah.
And then her talking to me about her father. Like, if any of those things had been different, if we were in different class, we would have never been in this position.
I knew somebody who's, they had some family members do very heinous things. As an adult, on some level, they justify it because they were drinking, right?
Yeah.
On some level, I hear what you're saying, and I think, well, that might be Sean trying to justify what happened. Because my response to them is that, look, I mean, there's people that drink, but they know enough not to do those heinous things, right? So I tell them, I say, I think you're just trying to justify somehow, because it helps us to justify it, right?
Yeah.
As human beings. You agree with that on some level? Is
I
that we
do.
can't be
Yeah.
in this world of justification all the time?
I think one of the problems for me was I did this act, and I knew I was doing something wrong, but really thinking I'm doing it to help a friend and kind of justified in my own head why I was about to do this thing. And I never thought past being arrested. So all of a sudden, I'm doing this act to essentially end the situation when really it was just the beginning. And ended up spending the next 24 years, or sentenced to 24 years. When I did the act and got to prison, I had the other guys I lived with, the officers, the staff at the prison, like slap me on the back saying, hey, nice job, I would have done the same thing. It was very confusing as a
Wow,
teenager.
that's interesting.
I knew for sure that I did something wrong, but it was really easy to take the back slapping and say, yeah, that's right, I did what I had to do.
Right.
Even though that was far from the case, and lived with that for a couple of years before I knew I had to really start to sort it out in my own head.
Right. It's interesting because I think in your case, it was kind of like the perfect storm on some level, if we
Yeah.
can say that,
Yeah.
because you were on drugs, right? It was written that the prosecutor called you a drugged-up sociopath with a $200 a day coke habit. Is that true? You was shelling out $200 a day, or they're just kind of playing things up a bit?
Slightly exaggerated. I
Right.
just feel like all the kids in school were getting high.
No, listen, I get that, man. I mean, I'm from Brooklyn. I have friends in Long Island.
I will say that I did not see myself as different from any of the other guys I grew up with. So that description, you've just described my entire graduating class in high school.
Right.
So, I mean, not to justify it.
It's a
high and
reality.
using drugs.
It's the
and
truth.
I didn't see myself as being any different than all the other kids I was growing up with.
When you did the deed, were you on drugs?
I was not.
You were sober.
I was sober.
Wow, that's the irony. That's a big irony there. So do you think, I mean, how much do you think drugs played a big role here in this? I mean, all the drugs
I
you were
would
doing
say
at the
that
time?
I've had poor decision-making skills my entire life. To this day, I do things and then second, like, oh my God, what the hell did I just do?
Why do you think that's the case?
Just the way I'm built.
Well, we can't say that on some level because it could have been something that your mom didn't or did teach you.
Well,
or,
certainly in your
I
environment,
do
but-
certain things and I trace them back and I say, you know, when I leave the house every day, I got to check the oven to see if it's on, even though I didn't use the oven. When I was a kid, my mother used to check the fucking, it's like OCD. It's just like this obsessive thing, you know?
Yeah.
Have you ever done soul searching to sort of go a little deeper to see exactly?
Anyone that's laid in a cell has searched the ceiling for hours and hours and hours.
Right.
And you start to talk about why you make the decisions you do. But the fact is, you couple already making bad decisions, and then you add, you know, drugs into that mix, and you make even poorer decisions.
You never soul search to say why I always second guess myself.
No, I think for me, the big thing was being sober.
You've been through therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it.
Yeah, a lot of substance abuse
Do
stuff.
they have therapy in prison?
Yeah, they
They
do.
do. They have like, but they're counselors though. They're not psychologists, right?
Yeah, there's certainly no.
There's different levels of it, all right? There are the psychologists, but those are really for people that, you know, require psychotropic medication. But then there's therapeutic programs that are designed to address why you're in prison. There's like anger management, there's aggression replacement training, et cetera, other things.
You've been through that.
I took the aggression replacement training program, yes.
And I guess you had to because you felt like
Yeah, a lot of us have to.
Right, and you did too.
Yeah.
Right, right, for different reasons.
As part of your parole consideration.
Yeah, correct. The board wants to see you take some programs that are designed to address why you're there.
Sure. All right. So, question: you were motivated by something to do what you did. Was it personal, financial, or both?
Well, I would just say that the to set the record straight.
Yes.
Yeah.
I took money to kill my friend's father, which made it a contract killing just by the nature of it.
Yeah.
But the fact is, I took the money from her and gave it to someone else to get a gun to kill her father. I never took a penny.
It's $1,000 for the gun.
She gave me $400. I never
Oh, they never followed up and gave you another $600?
There was no other money. I took.
But wait a minute, it was agreed upon for $1,000, right? He gave you $400.
I took $400 and gave it to the guy that gave me the gun, and never took another penny from anybody else.
Why did you go to Cheryl and say it's okay, we're all good?
I never saw Cheryl again after
Maybe
the
you didn't get
fact.
opportunity, right? You got
Oh,
arrested.
I see,
You got
right,
pinched
because 8
shortly
days
after that.
later you got pinched.
I literally handed the money that I got from her to give to the guy that gave me the gun.
Wow.
I used that gun to kill her father. I never earned a penny in this.
Well, the question is, if you didn't get caught, would you have asked for the remaining $600?
I don't think so. I only took the money that I needed for the gun, and that was all he wanted.
Wow, that's interesting.
In all honesty, I mean, you're going back 30 years now. Would I have asked for 600 more? I don't know. But it was not part of the game plan.
All right, so you're saying it was more personal than financial, the motivation.
It was the
You
only
wanted to
motivation.
help-
I thought I was
the
helping
only
a friend.
sole motivation, right. How close were you with Cheryl?
We're not that close.
You're not that close.
No, we
Right.
grew up sitting in the same homeroom together and doing nothing else together in our lives.
Well, you're telling me you're not that close now, which kind of changes the dynamic a little bit. I understand that if there was a friend of mine that was close to me and then I found out these heinous things were going on, I don't think I would do what you did. But, you know, maybe a baseball bat.
When you're 118 pounds, you're not taking a baseball bat to anybody.
Right. Was that partly the motivation because you wanted to help, but you knew maybe the bat, you know, he might kick my ass, so let me... Because I replay that in my head.
My only course of action here was to have a weapon. And even getting arrested, and they said, well, why did you shoot him 5 times? I went there to kill somebody. I don't understand
You
what
wanted to get the job done.
Yeah, like to shoot him once, I thought made absolutely no sense to me.
Well, then the question is, was there a level of fear that if you only shoot him once, he might just get back up and kick my ass?
I mean,
you were 118 pounds,
I
you
didn't
said.
have any other, there was no other way to measure this situation.
And I'm asking these questions because I'm trying to get into your mind.
I
Because
had never shot anyone before.
Right.
I'd never seen anyone get shot before.
Right.
My only homework was to watch TV and see Dirty Harry and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and they were shooting people 5 times and they were still getting up. I had a small 22 caliber weapon.
Right, a rifle.
A rifle. I thought
Right.
I had to shoot this person more than once
Right.
if they were going to actually get killed. And I went there to kill that person. I didn't go there to wound somebody. I didn't go there to scare somebody.
Yeah.
So going there with a small caliber, I thought that was what I had to do to be successful.
Right.
And that's what I did.
Was there any child abuse that you were part of, either directly or indirectly? Did you know other, family members that were? No, nothing like that. You never had any experience whatsoever, directly or indirectly?
And since this happened with Cheryl, there's been a lot of different folks that would ask me, oh, well, do you believe that this was what was really happening in her house? And I just think, as a teenager, we were both 16, her telling me what was going on in her household, I didn't doubt what was happening there. I mean, she really put her own life in jeopardy because what she saw was about to start happening with her 8-year-old sister.
Right. Well,
that's all she had on, and that's all I had to go on.
So was that the thought process in your head?
I think
in other
that
words, is this a strong sense of pressure that I got to do this as quick as possible?
To tell Cheryl that I was going to do this after we had talked. I mean, this was over months that we were talking and her telling me what was going on with her father. And when I agreed to do this, it went from being a conversation to her literally telling, like, every day, like, when's it going to happen? And
okay, so she was pushing you a little bit, right?
A lot.
All right,
So
well, there's a quote here. It says, you recall Cheryl saying, who would be nuts enough to do something like this? And you replied, people will do anything for money, right?
Well,
but in your case, you told me it wasn't for money, it's personal.
But this was in regard to us sitting in the classroom, and there was a news piece that came on with a teacher that hired 2 kids. She wasn't. That wasn't about us.
Oh, I see. I got you.
Out of
okay,
context.
Interesting. Okay. Sean, you understand. I think you kind of get to know me. I'm not casting any aspersions. I'm just trying to get to know what was in your mind at the time, because as fucked up as things are, I think, I don't know, maybe if I'm in that situation, I would have done what you've done if I was close enough with the person. But if somebody said to me, shelled out the story the way Cheryl did you, I would have been livid, angry, whatever emotions you go through, and try to maybe have some repercussions. But I don't think I would have jumped to the case of grabbing a gun and shooting somebody, because I guess the thought process and the question to you is, did you think you were going to get away with it, or did you think that, because I think I read somewhere that you thought, hey, you know what, I'm going to do this and go to prison.
I'm embarrassed I mean, the whole thing is embarrassing, but to say now that planning this with Cheryl, finding the gun, getting there, shooting her father,
right,
on the way home from shooting her father, I didn't know. I got to my house and said, well, what now?
Right.
And I literally went to school.
I know that. That's what I was going to get to. So you went to school, and after you pumped 5 bullets into this guy, you obviously knew he was dead. I mean, you shot him in strategic areas. When you shot, did you just shoot random, or you just
shot random?
In the chest, head?
I put 5 bullets in the gun, I emptied the gun, and I walked home.
Right, but he must have, after the first or second shot, he must have just dropped, and then you just went over him and just pumped another 3 shots, right? 3 or 4 shots, right? So you went to school. That, to me, I was taken aback when I read that, because I'm thinking, wow, if I did something like that, I would be probably headed toward the wilderness. Somewhere where it's quiet, where I can gather my thoughts and sort of figure out, what the fuck did I do? You went to school. How was your day at school that day? Was it were your teacher say, hey, Sean, you're not focused? What's going on?
Or Sean was quiet anyway.
Sean was quiet anyway. But
there was no flags going up because I was sitting quiet in the classroom.
Was there a storm in the head?
I had no idea what the next day held for me. And it was another week and a half before they arrested me.
That was on replay, right? In other words, you must have been going through that whole school day, replaying what's going to happen to me. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right. So tremendous sense of pressure that day. It wasn't an easy day for you sitting in school.
I did not sleep until they arrested me.
You didn't sleep for 8 days?
I was a complete wreck.
So at some point, considering now all the toll it's playing on your mind, at some point you must have had regret, saying, what the fuck did I do? Because I can't even sleep for 8 days.
Yeah.
Did you harbor any resentment towards Cheryl after that? No.
No, I mean, in the end, I got in it to help my friend. That didn't change.
Wow. The next day after the killing, Rob, Cheryl's boyfriend at the time, who went to become her husband, who eventually became her husband, paid you the first installment of $400. I found it odd that you didn't ask for any more money.
No.
Okay, so
I never saw either of them again.
Okay, but here's the deal, though. You said you used the $400 to buy the gun, But now, in the article that I read, it says that the guy paid you $400 after you did the murder. Where did you get the gun from?
I gave the gun, I literally handed that money right to the guy that gave me the gun.
Oh, he gave you the gun?
Yeah.
And then you said, oh, I see,
Which
I
is
see.
what ended up getting me in trouble, because in my head, it made sense to pay for the gun, but the second I handed him the money, that kid said, oh shit, you just killed somebody's father. I wasn't the best mastermind criminal.
You would think that, you know, Rob is the one that's in love with Cheryl.
And Rob's the
He
one
should be the guy that would go out and pump 5 bullets
but
into
he
it.
was the one that coordinated this whole thing.
Right, but he only got 5 years probation, right? And then Cheryl got, what,
And he
3.5
was
months?
older than the rest of us, and
Right, right.
this whole thing.
Yeah.
You're reading this,
Yeah.
and you're thinking about this whole thing and about how it came together, not as a 16-year-old.
Right.
You need to step back and look
Right.
at this with different lenses.
I'm surprised you didn't feel any resentment, because you did the killing, you can't sleep now, you realize in your mind your world is just tossed into the storm, right?
Yeah.
You didn't feel any sense of resentment saying, well, why the fuck did I do it? Rob is in love with Cheryl, why didn't he go out and do this fucking thing?
I did this act to help a friend,
Yeah.
and none of that ever changed.
None of what I just said, though, crossed your mind.
If anything that made it harder is she continued to write me in prison
Right.
until after I got to Elmira.
Right.
And I'm about to start a 24-year journey, and she's getting ready for prom.
Yeah.
And I wrote back, and I did this with not just Cheryl, but a lot of my friends. I cut off all communication, because for me, if I'm thinking about you going to prom,
Yeah.
I'm not concentrating on where I'm at. And I needed to concentrate.
So basically, you
I cut off a lot of people.
Yeah, and you cut off Cheryl because you needed to. It's almost like that. There's this thing that's kind of still hanging on your shoulders, and you have to erase anything from that world, right? Is that correct? Yeah, yeah. So you weren't that close with Cheryl.
We were
classmates.
casual friends in class.
Did you get close at a certain point? In other words, when she came out and she started telling you what happened, was there a level of sympathy or something? Was there you never had any sexual relationship with her? Nothing like that. Did you like Rob?
Rob wasn't even in our class. I didn't really know Rob. Rob
I see.
only got introduced to me in the course of
I
the
see.
planning of this murder.
And you know what I found ironic? The guy paid for his own murder. They took the $400 out of his own safe.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, that's what was reported.
Yeah.
He paid for his own murder.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
All right, so she got 6 months. She got out 3.5 months later. I read that he picked her up in a limousine with hard rock music blaring out of the limo. And they just rode off into the sunset. And again, Cheryl, I cast no aspersions with Cheryl. I don't, to be in that situation, I don't know what that feels like. I don't understand it completely, but I can only imagine what she went through, particularly knowing that now her father is threatening that he's going to do this again with an 8-year-old child, which is disgusting, right? I mean, on some levels, people might say that if a father is doing that to his 8-year-old, it's worse than murder. What are your thoughts on that?
That's not mine to say.
Okay. How about you, Jeff?
I have no opinion.
Usually opinionated. You have no
Yeah,
opinion?
I have no opinion on that. No.
It is
Kind of an
tricky.
unusual thing to opine on.
I got to prison.
Well, we're talking about the way Tom described it with you, with wrongfully convicted people.
Right.
It's a spiritual murder. It's a spiritual murder.
Yeah.
When you do these heinous things to a young child, particularly 8 years old, you know, one of the last shows we had, I had a gentleman on here that was by his Boy Scout leader. He was 10, 11 years old, and he molested him.
Yeah.
And we sat and we spoke about his life and how that affected his life. He went on to become a burglar. Like today, we see a lot of these kids
With the shootings.
school shootings. He had those same thoughts back in those days. He wanted to go in and shoot up his
Want to
classmates.
lash out, yeah.
A really deep-seated anger has a lot to do with, I think, what goes on and all the crazy things we do. When you look at your case and you look at you're pissed off at your father, you're pissed off at your stepfather. Maybe on some level you resented your mother for bringing this guy into the house.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sure.
And the drugs, which kind of exacerbated. So it's kind of like a perfect storm, if you will.
Yeah.
And it created, you know, what happened to you. Because this is deep-seated anger, right? You're saying?
Yeah.
Is this true? Yeah. So 8 days later, you arrested. You didn't think you'd get away with it, or you thought you'd get away with it? Or
I literally never thought past the day that I pulled the trigger. I had no idea. And the fact that I didn't get arrested immediately really scared me because I hadn't made any plans to actually live with this.
Yeah.
Live with the action. And I remember picking up the Newsday like 2 days after, and it talked about they were looking for 2 gunmen. And I thought, oh my God, if they're looking for 2 gunmen, they're looking in the wrong. And
Did you think that somebody would get wrongfully convicted for it?
I thought that
Did you think you were going to get away with it?
if I
At that
got away
point,
with it, I hadn't
Did you think you were going
planned.
to? But did you think that you were going to? At that point, when you heard that they were looking for 2 people, which obviously wasn't you, at that point, did you think you were going to get away
The
with it?
thought that actually crossed my mind was turning myself in.
Okay.
And I just thought, I'm not. I thought, man, I hadn't thought
I
past
gotta
this
tell you,
moment.
it's such a, I mean, you're telling me all this stuff, all the stuff that I read, I'm hearing now from your own mouth. It's such a tremendously selfless act that you did.
It doesn't make a
because-
lot of sense.
I'm not saying whether it makes sense or not. The act itself is so selfless. I guess on some level, I'm trying to make sense of it all to see, like, what was going through your mind, because it is such a selfless act. You're telling me that you thought your life was over and you're going to be caught, and now you're saying that maybe they were looking at other people and you're thinking about turning yourself in. And I can only imagine the pressure. It's like you want to turn yourself in because you want to do the right thing, but on the other hand, you're thinking, like, what did I get myself into?
I also didn't know anything about as a 16-year-old, I didn't know anything about the criminal justice system. If I get arrested, am I just thrown in the back of a bus and gone for life? Is it 25? Like, I don't even know what the context is. And I remember getting arrested 8 days later and being in the county jail and a lawyer coming because my parents had, got me a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I remember he said, "Did you talk to anybody?" And I just thought, well, what are you doing here? Like, I didn't even understand what that meant, that we're going to actually fight. I'm going to go in there and now say I'm innocent?
Right.
And it was almost harder fighting the case over the next 8 months. It just seemed like such a sham because everybody knew I did what I was sitting there saying I was innocent of.
It must have been a surreal thing going through that whole process. The glare of the cameras.
It was
and
bizarre.
It was bizarre. So going through that, were you numb to the whole thing? What was going through your mind when you were sitting in court and they're going back and forth and prosecution?
I think just waiting for it to be over.
Yeah.
I knew in the end I wasn't going home.
Yeah.
So it was just a matter of figuring out how much time I was going to get.
Right.
And I remember my father was so frustrated.
That must have took a toll on them, right?
They offered me 15 to life as a plea bargain.
Right.
And I just thought, man, 15's way better than 25.
Right.
And that's what you would get if you blew trial.
Right.
So
Well,
But only as the minimum, though. Most people
Yeah.
are not going to get the minimum.
I was just saying to my parents, because they were very involved with the discussion, and I just said, I think I should take this 15 to life. In the process of my parents discussing, they were not in favor. They wanted me to go to trial. In the process of us discussing this, they came back. The prosecutor came back and offered me 8 1/3 to 25.
Right.
And at that point,
Oh, so that was the plea deal that you took. You took the plea.
I
That was
took
a plea.
the 8 1/3 to 25.
Because I
yeah.
found it to be 8 to 20. Well, I read 8 to 24, but yeah, 8 to 25.
The judge then, upon sentencing, made it even lower because of the circumstances. It gave me 8 to 24.
He gave you an extra year less because he, on some level, he's saying the judge
He
kind of
connected,
threw
yeah.
you some sympathy, threw you a year of sympathy because of the whole.
Yep.
Wow, that's interesting. Is that
And
odd?
obviously believed the case, believed the
Right.
circumstances.
You know what? That makes sense. I mean, again, I thought it would be, but I didn't realize it was a plea deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then you could have gotten out after 8 years. You doubled up. You did another 8.
I didn't transition well in the beginning.
You didn't transition well, but the thing is, you said the first 2 years you were kind of angry, and then eventually you started sort of stabilizing and becoming. From 2 years till the 8th year where you were eligible for parole, how did you tack on another 8? Do they tack on those 8 the first 2 years?
2 years at a time.
Every 24 months I would be under review.
By
And
the
I
parole
was just
board.
kept getting 24 months and 24 months and 24 months. And
If you stabilized after 2 years,
because they rely on the information from your disciplinary jacket, and that's what they just keep bringing up every 2 years. And
so
of course, the
every
initial,
2 years they brought up the first 2 years?
and the initial offense, which you
and
can
the initial offense,
you can't
right.
change. So they're going with the
Right.
initial offense, they're going with my disciplinary infractions, and then every 24 months, even after I was in college, even after I was starting programs, even after I was working with the superintendent's office, it didn't make a difference.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. You must have been tremendously, tremendous sense of frustration, right? I mean,
It's hard. It's hard to go back
because
every
after
24
2 years,
months.
you're thinking, well, what the fuck? I'm doing everything right. I'm being a good guy, and they're still giving me a hard time.
Yeah, and then my family, I remember making this decision as a kid that I'm going to do this act, I'm going to help my friend, but I'm the one that has to deal with it. No one's helping me, no one's going to be with me when I do it, I'm not going to plan it with anybody. But the fact is, as a 16-year-old, no, dummy, your whole family goes to prison with you.
Yeah.
My neighbors, the kids I went to school with, I remember sitting in the county jail and seeing the news coverage with kids at the school, literally with banners, "Free Sean," like I threw a rock through the neighbor's window, like that somebody wasn't dead. And just the irony was rough to sit and witness.
So there was an intervention. So there reached a point in time early in your incarceration that there was an intervention?
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So, the older guys, the 25-year-olds, would say to me, "Oh, man, does your mother know where you are?" They would tease me. But a lot of them really took care of me. The officers, the staff, the older inmates.
Wow, that's interesting.
They made me go to school.
Only because you did something supposedly noble in their eyes,
well,
right?
also because I was so young. There was this big brother thing going on. And
well, time out real quick, though. You were so young, too. You didn't, did you?
There was some old timers that kind of took me under their wing.
Okay, so you got a sense of that as well.
I did.
All right. Because the parallels are interesting between your cases. You both came, you were indicted at 16, you were convicted at 16, but still a year off.
Yeah. And you know what, even when I finally got through court and got to prison and landed in that first prison, I still looked like I was 15. I looked I still had braces on my teeth. I looked like I was freaking 14.
Yeah.
And now I'm in a maximum security prison. So I stuck out like a sore thumb. No one looked like me.
Right.
And the officers would bring around these groups of teenagers from the high schools, and they would always stop and pull me out of, I'd be in the mess hall and cleaning tables or cleaning dishes, and they'd always pull the white kid. "Oh, come, tell them what you're going through." And
it's like a scared straight program.
Yeah, and these kids were literally older than I was.
Right.
And I'd sit there and say, "Yeah, I'm serving 24 years."
Yeah, that's interesting.
And in some ways, it made me really start to think about that I maybe did have something to offer, even while locked up in this place, that I was able to help, that I was able to do something with my life.
Backpedaling just a bit, you had said that, so at this point, Cheryl is trying to convince you, right? I think you said, you felt there was no way out, you have to do this. What did Cheryl say? Was she such a convincing person? I mean, what could she possibly have said to you? Because now you also said to me that, you're going to do it, you're going to do it. She kept on kind of hammering you a little bit. But the initial conversation, take me through that. What did she say? Was she such a great sales lady?
As I look back now, I really felt trapped me was, as two teenagers, opening up the door by talking about this other crime, it opened us up to talk about her situation.
Yeah.
And she started by saying, "If I tell you something, you have to swear not to tell anybody else." I was already not a good decision maker, and now I was isolated from everyone else that I would have gone to help for with this, including my parents or other friends.
That's interesting.
So getting into this conversation, and even then, back then I wasn't saying, "Oh, I'm a bad decision maker." Back then I thought I had everything under control.
Yeah.
Sure, what's going on?
Right.
I won't tell anybody. As she unloaded on this conversation with me, I couldn't talk to anyone else about it. And then as that unfolded over months, I really felt trapped in not doing it and letting her down and letting a friend down, and that no one else could help her. It wasn't until after I committed the crime that I found out that she had asked one of my other friends that said no. So someone else already knew about the crime.
That's interesting, wow. Well, it says, a Newsday article, just before Thanksgiving in '85, Cheryl first told Sean in Mrs. Hoban's homeroom at Newfield High School, you remember Mrs. Hoban? That she was looking for a hitman. Kids in class had been talking about a story in Newsday that morning, the arrest of a Mastic Beach woman and 5 men she had hired to kill her husband because he had been beating her, right? So it was already in the...
And those two young guys ended up serving time, we all sitting in the yard together talking about what we had done.
Oh, you met these guys?
Yeah.
So on some level, I mean, those guys, indirectly kind of sort of influenced you on some level, right? Can we say that?
They pushed the stars into an alignment that was not good for me.
That's a great way to put it.
It's a great way to put it. And the next thing you know, Cheryl said, I want somebody killed. That's according to you. I felt immediately that eyes were on me. Why were eyes on you? 118-pound kid. Why would they be on you? You'd think they'd be on this some 300-pound monster.
I really felt like she took me in her confidence. And though I did feel isolated, I didn't understand that at the time. And as I said, yeah, sure, what's going on? As she started to explain what was happening, and I had no one else to talk to, I made an attempt before the actual crime. And I went there and I broke a window in the property across the street that would bring her father out. I threw a brick through the window in a house that we knew had alarms on it, and I waited, and he never came out.
You had the gun with you?
I had the gun with me.
You had the gun with you.
And then the next day in school, she knew that I had tried because the brick went through the window and landed on the table and never hit the floor and set the alarm off.
And the father never came out?
He never came out. So she said to me, I know you tried, thank you. And I just said, hey, I tried, that's the end of it.
Wow.
And I just remember that we felt like a truck was taken off my back. My commitment was off. I actually attempted it, didn't work, we're done, and we went on the Christmas break. And during those 10 days on the Christmas break, or whatever it was, seemed like a million years, I couldn't stop thinking about that I had let her down.
I wonder if Cheryl at the time thought that this kid is a little guy,
loner.
He's impressionable, and I'm going to sort of set my mark on him because I know he'll do it for me because I'm a good sales chick.
Yeah.
You know?
But I would also ask you to respectfully
any...
think about the fact that you're talking about two 16-year-old kids. Do you really think
No, I understand that. We're talking about two 16-year-old kids, but... Yeah, go ahead.
But you really think that two 16-year-old girl that's being abused thought that far ahead?
His point is she's not able to overreach him like that, the way that you're phrasing it, because she's 16 herself. I mean,
but maybe I could be wrong, but
look,
you
weren't there, so you're just gauging by what I'm gauging, so there's no way you could know, number one. Number two is, I'm not saying it did happen. Again, Cheryl, please, I cast no aspersions. But I'm just bringing the thoughts out of my head of in other words, because...
You're thinking as an adult, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I guess, because, it says here, the next thing you know, Cheryl said, I want somebody killed. You said, I felt immediately that eyes were on me. And then you said, that's something I could do. Because you're like the guy that people can count on, right? Growing up, did you have sort of an eager to please quality?
Absolutely,
You're always,
but also not even never thinking this was actually going to come to fruition. Like, for me, the skinny, nerdy white kid, yeah, I can help you.
Yeah, and you said, we'll talk about it.
Made me feel really good to be able to say,
we'll talk about it.
Yeah, sure, I could be that guy for you. And it was obviously...
But it also says in the article, I think that it wouldn't come up again, but then it did come up again.
Every day.
Every day, which is, again, I asked this question,
we start every single day together in school.
And then we went on Christmas break, just like you just said. Pica paused for a moment and started to cry. And by the way, you're welcome to cry here if you want. If we can get some tears out of you, it'd be nice.
All right.
Make for good ratings.
Jeff is tired of seeing me. I cry everywhere I go. He's tired of seeing me cry.
And when he continued, his voice was soft and got choked up. And you said, and man, I thought about her every day of that break. I just couldn't let it go. You just couldn't get it out of your mind.
And she had no idea I was coming back. She woke up in the morning and found her father dead.
Wow. That's deep. That's deep stuff. You said you didn't have the courage to tell her that you didn't really want to kill her father. If I was in your shoes, I would imagine it would take more courage to tell her that than to kill the guy.
Apparently not.
You know what I mean? That's the, in other words, looking back at it now and what I just said to you, does that make sense?
I speak at high schools pretty regularly.
I'm asking you to speak as an adult now, not as a 16-year-old, scared, frightened, confused kid.
I tell this story to high schools. Midway through my story, they'll say, man, that is so stupid. And I'm like, well, that's the reaction we're looking for.
All right.
Because I did some stupid stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't think it through. I thought it was easier to just shoot her father than actually tell her I didn't have the courage to do it.
Right. In a video I saw of you in 2011, you said, yeah, the tough guy in me, sure, I can do that. And then you said, quote unquote, where that came from, I don't know. It's just almost like you were possessed by some foreign spirit.
I had never even had a fist fight by that point.
You never
in my
even had a
life.
fist fight. And you're 118 pounds, which I know 118 pounds is a little thin guy.
I am not confrontational. I'm not a tough guy. Never was a tough guy. And this was my moment to rescue somebody.
Well, here's the thing that's interesting. I read something that really struck at me here. Your mom, those who knew him said Sean Pica had always been a sympathetic kid. But his mother, Joanne, said after he was arrested that she had warned him, quote unquote, I always told him, even as a kid, you're going to try to help the wrong person someday. And sure enough,
I don't know if that helped the prosecution or not.
No.
Well,
anyway, we're talking after the fact, but that struck me as interesting because it's almost like your mom, on some level, had a little crystal ball.
There was no doubt in her mind that I did it.
She knew. She knew. And so when this happened, you sat down with your mom. You must have had private moments after you got arrested.
We never, to this date, have ever talked about this.
Wow. Wow, that's interesting.
What do you say? That I ruined their lives?
Well, look, listen, I understand that. Well, you talk about other things, though. You're still tight with your mom.
Yeah,
Yeah. Isn't there a sense of you, though, that you want to put a
No.
period at the end of the sentence? Because I think I'm a firm believer that that is a healthy thing to do.
There's nothing healthy about talking about this with my mom.
Really, even though it festers inside of you.
It doesn't fester inside of me.
No.
I'm done with
Okay.
it. I served my time.
Maybe with your mom. She
I don't
wants
know,
to.
but
Did
that's
you ever
not-
get a sense that your mom wanted to talk about it?
I'm sure she does.
Oh, that's interesting. You're sure she does.
I'm sure she does.
But you have no
I've
desire.
never apologized. I've
never
never
apologized.
explained it. I've never been through it with them, mom and dad.
Would you look in the camera and apologize now?
No.
No, because you don't even want to. Is it because, why is it because of the shame? Shame that's involved?
Yeah, I would say.
I mean, you say that you're sure that your mom wants to, but you're not giving her that outlet to do so.
we know our limitations.
And as much as you love your mom, on some level, you're preventing her from being totally free of the situation? Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And you're willing to say that?
But it certainly won't be the worst thing I've ever done.
No, well, of course, I'm not. Yeah, well, obviously, we know all three of us know.
We know what the worst thing that you've ever done is.
I've made some poor decisions. I lived 16 years of half my life. I walked out of Sing Sing. I had more time in prison than out of prison. There's a
Right.
lot of things I'd like to forget.
What you're saying is that you don't feel the urge to do it with your mom and have that conversation,
No.
even with your dad. Have you? You never spoke, not even with your dad either.
No.
And so, do you feel that the reason why they don't bring it up is because they get a sense that you don't want to bring it up, so they respect your wishes?
I don't know.
You don't know.
Yeah.
That's
They've
so
never
interesting.
broached it, and I've never broached it.
Wow.
They supported me the whole time I was away.
You spoke about it with your brothers?
No.
Not even with your brothers?
No.
No. And your brothers maybe not so much because they're not your parents, but they're still family. They still love you.
Yeah.
Do you think that they get a sense that, oh, Sean doesn't want to talk about it, so I'm not going to bring it up?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, right. And so the $64 million question, why don't you want to? In other words, if you understand the need for them to discuss it, because I think you understand that there might be a need for them to discuss it.
No.
Why don't you want it? Is it because the need for you not to discuss it supersedes all needs?
It's too painful
It's
for
too
me
painful.
to sit and talk about how I ripped my family in half.
Right. Is this painful discussing it now with me?
Yeah.
On some level it is.
Yeah.
Okay. I understand how you feel. You know, basically you're saying to me is that it's way too painful and you just can't have that conversation
Yeah.
with them.
Yep.
Okay. Duly noted. I want to discuss a little bit about this whole prison thing. So you went in there and you must have felt, felt a tremendous sense of helplessness, fear. Because you went into it a little different than what
I
Jeff
thought my
did.
life was over. I don't know how Jeff felt, but when you get to that cell block that's 5 stories high and is just everyone's yelling and screaming and the noise is
Right.
deafening.
Right.
They give you, on your very first day there, a uniform that doesn't really fit you well.
Right.
A couple of cosmetics.
Too big or too small?
Too big.
Too
And
big.
well, everything was too big. And they
Right.
give you this sheet and it's a time computation sheet.
Right.
And on that sheet, it talks about the days you've already spent in prison, the day you were arrested.
Right.
It talks about the time you were sentenced to. It talks about your eligibility dates, and it talks about the max date that they could hold you to.
Interesting.
And it was 1986, and the max date was 2010. Why they would give that to any teenager everywhere, at any time, is beyond me.
Well,
They lock you in a cell alone and give you this sheet and say good luck.
Does that play on the fact that, I mean, there was a couple notes here, I don't know where I'm going to find them now, but does that play on the fact that we discussed that prison is supposed to be a rehabilitation program, but we discussed in many cases it's punitive?
Right.
So Sean is saying, can't imagine why anybody would say that to a 16-year-old child. Do you feel a sense that maybe that was for punitive reasons? They wanted to punish this kid on some level?
No.
They didn't even think about it.
No,
the fact that
So you're
you
saying
would-
it's more stupidity than anything. It's just thoughtless thing.
poor planning.
Correct.
planning,
As they
right.
throw you in the cell.
Plus, that whole process giving the paper was not put together with the idea of giving it to a teenager. That was designed to give it to an adult.
Yeah, sure, I
Yeah,
understand.
yeah.
You did a lot of drugs, obviously, to escape, right? Before you went to prison.
Yeah.
All right, and then I find out when you went to prison, you did more drugs.
I didn't
Easy
realize.
to get. Easy
I
to
didn't
get.
realize
right?
I would have access to more drugs in prison than out of prison.
Right, what kind of stuff? Cocaine?
You know
pot?
what? I continue with cocaine and pot.
Right.
It
No
just-
pills, meth,
No.
ludes, anything like that?
Nah.
Nothing.
But
the
it just seemed like
coke
a
and
good
pot.
idea to forget about where I was.
Right. Daily?
Pretty daily.
Daily. So basically, you go to prison, you start partying. A few
Wow,
words
a
of
lot
luck.
of it is isolated though,
It's in your cell.
because I
man.
would
Oh, I
cop
see.
drugs and go back
Right.
to my cell.
You ever get caught with them?
No.
You never got caught with them either?
No.
Wow. And you would think you would. You fought a lot, and I would imagine the worst part of it all is you had that anger still driving in you for the first 2 years. So now we're talking about you went from anger, drugs before prison, anger, drugs while you're still in prison, plus you got the thoughts compounding everything, just exacerbating everything, making it that much worse. Is that the worst part about it, is the anger in your thoughts?
I didn't really have the luxury to be angry.
You have the luxury because you were taking drugs.
No, just because, I mean, you're in a cell block, no one looks like you, and you're surviving. You can't have anger and survival in the same sentence.
I understand that, but you've painted yourself as a kid, and even now as an adult on some level, where mental resilience is not in the full capacity that you'd like it to be. And mental resilience in the sense that you don't have the mental resilience to give to your parents to have a conversation, right? So you shy away from it, right? So on some level, you're painting this person as an adult. I would imagine you would be the same person as a kid where you're somewhat on some level mentally weak. Now, I'm not saying you're mentally weak as an adult
No,
because
I hear
the
you.
stuff that you've accomplished after that takes mental resilience to do. So you become a very mentally strong person, and I take my hat off. But you're telling me that you didn't have time for anger. Did you have time for fear?
I said I didn't have the luxury.
Luxury, okay.
If
So
you're in a cage,
what did you have the luxury? Because here's the deal.
Listen, hold on, hold on.
I know,
you're
but
in a
I
cage
know, but
with
it's
hundreds of people, and no one looks like you. If you're angry, you won't be alive in the morning.
I debate that by saying we cannot control our thoughts. Our thoughts come. Me as an adult right now, I got a vortex of chaos going on in my head sometimes, and it creates a sense of fear because I say, wait a minute, I can't turn them off. So in your case, I would imagine the same thing. You go into prison.
No, you're imagining wrong.
Imagining wrong. Right. So you were able to turn everything off, but it was the drugs that helped you, right? Help me understand.
I wasn't lashing out at anybody.
Right, but I'm
Like,
not talking about that. I'm talking fear. You had
I'm
no fear.
Straight up survival at this moment.
Right,
if
but
you
with
think because you shoot
survival
somebody,
does not come with fear?
If you think because you shoot somebody and kill somebody that now I don't have fear in a cell block,
Yeah.
is two very different things.
You did have fear.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were consumed by fear.
I would say on a regular basis.
Yeah, right.
I did not think I was going to live to hit 20.
Right. So you're saying it wasn't so much anger, you were more consumed by this fear, this sense of helplessness. I guess you thought
It
my
wasn't a
life.
sense of helplessness.
It was helplessness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
Have you been in a cell block before?
I've never. Well, I've been in one cell block before, but that was only because we were shooting something.
Okay.
It was a production, and I said, "Let me see what it feels like." And the moment I shut the cell door, I started feeling the walls closing in on me, and I opened it up again, knowing that I could open it up. Now, I can't imagine what you guys went through, knowing that you cannot open it up.
Over nearly 2 decades.
For nearly 2 decades, yeah.
I feel like you're oversimplifying slightly the idea that you get to a cell block, and because I had a homicide, I'm going to now, I don't know what. I mean,
You got into fights, though.
shooting somebody here, getting sentenced to 24 years here,
Yeah.
and ending up in a cell block here did not make me a tough guy. And now all of a sudden, I'm still 118 pounds, 2 inches shorter, and with braces on my teeth.
Right.
And that
I
was two different things.
I read somewhere you were working out, though, and you were getting into some fights, right?
I started lifting immediately because that was going to be my answer to all my problems.
Right. Sure, absolutely. Understood. Understood. And I'd probably do the same thing. So with the fights, obviously, it wasn't something you started, right?
Some were started by me, some weren't. Sometimes you see things coming and it's better to throw the first punch.
Right. What were they for? Do you remember? Just out of curiosity. I know it was a long way back, but was it somebody said the wrong thing, or what?
I mean, it was a little of, all
Dark
of the
humor
above.
that you didn't like? Or?
No, there was no humor going on.
When you got in, everybody stuck by you, or did you have abandonment issues?
No, I actually pushed a lot of people away in this kind of moment of, oh, I need to concentrate on what I'm about to get into here. But the fact is, they all came back, and they all supported me, and they all stuck by me.
So your parents were visiting you frequently?
And again, having retired New York City cops visiting a prison,
Right.
I can't imagine how difficult that was.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, did you
Again,
try
something
to
we never
push them
talked
away?
about.
Did you try to push your
No,
parents
my
away?
parents were, there was no pushing my parents away, yeah.
And your siblings?
No, well, they were too young to come up.
Right,
Yeah.
right. You went through you went through a good tour of various prisons, 9 in all. Why so many prisons?
I wasn't good at taking direction.
Right. Solitary confinement, twice.
Yes.
What'd they put you in for?
Fighting both times.
Both times. You must have beat somebody pretty bad. Did you get solitary
I
confinement?
actually got beaten up pretty bad both times.
Oh, you did?
There's no one-sided fights.
Right.
You're either fighting or you're not.
So that's 23 hours a day
Yeah.
in a cell. What'd that feel like? That can't be a walk
When
in the
I
park.
initially got there, I thought, oh, time out. This is going to be great. Get out of the population. Within the first day, you realize that it takes a very big toll
Right.
on your human nature to be isolated from human contact 24
Yeah,
hours a day.
sure. We're social creatures. We
Yeah.
need people around us.
And as you've already said, not painting the strongest mental picture.
Yeah.
So you go in already not being the strongest person mentally, and it really it adds up very quickly.
I understand. On some level, and I know, Jeff, you said people don't know what you're in for, but I would imagine at some point people find out. They knew, right? Giving you pats on the back. So that gave you some street cred, right?
Yeah, it did. You know, I wouldn't take it very far.
We're talking about prison now. We're not talking
Yeah.
about out here.
No, but I mean, inside, I mean, I absolutely think it's helped, but I wouldn't put too much credo in that.
You ever feel suicidal?
No.
No. No. Even though you knew that your life was over the first 2 years, you thought things are just out of my control.
I just kept fighting.
You kept fighting.
Yeah.
Even 23 hours a day in solitary.
I never gave up.
Good for you. Well, that shows on one level, it shows a tremendous sense of strength. I mean, that's mental
I
resilience.
don't know if I thought about it at the time. It just, for me, you know, we saw people take their lives.
Mm.
And for me, I never wanted to be that guy. I never wanted to quit, you know?
You didn't finish high school. Why do you think you were asked to help other prisoners with reading and writing? Because you weren't an English teacher yourself, right?
While I was sitting there feeling sorry for myself, one of the officers coming to me and saying, would you consider helping these other guys? I remember thinking, I can't even help myself. How am I going to possibly help one of the other guys? And the officer said, you're one of the most educated guys around. Because most of the guys don't know how to read and write. And if you think prison is rock bottom, but the only way you can communicate with the outside world is a phone call you can't afford, or to write or receive a letter, and you don't know how to do either of those things, the prison gets really dark really fast.
Yeah. Well, reading from the article, inmates began coming to Sean for help communicating with their families. As they did, he began to witness the community that education fosters in a culture where you don't do anything for free. Unexpectedly, Sean uncovered the power of service. When I read that, I got a little touched, you know, and I applaud you.
I just felt like I was manipulating the whole population. I'll teach you how to learn to read and write.
Were they paying you for that? Were they paying you packs of cigarettes?
I never took money.
Did you
So
not?
immediately, guys will say, well, everyone takes money. What do you mean you're not? And it made this weird context.
Well, in the article here, they talk about Big Al.
Yeah.
Big Al, an inmate who measured up to his name.
What a way with words on that one.
Recruited Sean to participate in a community youth program that brought troubled teens into prison once a month, sitting among teens his age. Sean began sharing his perspective about prison and family, what it's like to feel like you let everyone down. And Sean vividly recalls breaking down in tears the first time he had cried in years. As he talked to teens his age, vulnerability began knocking down walls, and something changed that day. So on some level, though, when those tears came rolling down and made you vulnerable, you can make me cry too, Sean.
You know what? I walked out of that room, and the officers and the teenagers and everyone was crying. And I had no idea what I had done. But on the way into that room, where Big Al said, hey, we need you, not because you're a good speaker, but because you're the same age as these kids, and we need them to see that.
Yeah.
And they never told me what I was going to talk about. I got in that room, and he said, I want you to talk about the connection of prison life and family. And I just started crying. And
Interesting.
when I walked out of that room, the officer hugged me.
Wow.
And then Big Al hugged me. And Big Al said in my ear, that was brilliant. I want you to cry every month.
Wow.
And I'll just never forget that.
You know, that's really beautiful. That's a really beautiful moment. I think they saw something sincere in you, which is what I see in you now. Even though on the one hand, we could say, oh, he's a killer, he's a murderer. But I see the goodness in you. I see the sincerity in you. I saw it in your videos. And on some level, is it fair to say that sincerity saved your life? There's a quality about you where Big Al saw, the guard saw, and that sort of created this whole future, right?
Guys would stop me in the cell block, and the movie came out on CBS, you know, they started to learn about what I had done, and the guys would stop me in the cell block and say, well, you're so stupid.
Right.
She used you. You're an idiot. Aren't you mad?
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm not mad. I don't think she did.
Yeah. So you're in prison, and we got up to Big Al, and they said, you want to do this. How did that sort of build into Hudson Link and your future?
Because I always struggled in school, I get to prison, and now I want to sleep late. I want to hang out in the weight yard. I want to play pinochle.
Right.
School's, now it's off the plate. The older guys that I was living with, they weren't going for that. And I was literally surviving every day on these guys taking care of me. So when they said, Sean, you're going to go to school, and it was a do as I say, none of them had finished high school, but I was gonna.
Right.
So they really pushed me to go to school. And I remember saying to them, like, school's not my thing.
Right.
And for the first time in my life, somebody said to me, it doesn't matter, because we're gonna help you. And when I got that high school diploma, there should have been 25 guys up on that stage with me.
You got a little choked up about it when you said you got that meant a lot to you, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, high school diploma.
And they wouldn't let me in. They made me keep going.
So they really pushed you through. I mean, you had a really great support system in
They tutored me.
prison.
They made me go to school.
Right.
They helped me with my paper. I mean, every single bit of that schooling.
Wow, that's interesting.
They got me through it.
Almost like a family in prison that kind of really pushed you along.
It was.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting. Very interesting.
And then at some point, you went into college
I
while in prison?
I started, because back then in the 80s, you couldn't just go to college. Pre-college for a year.
Right.
And then finally go into college.
When did the thought come into your mind, 16 years, the whole kit and caboodle, when did it come into your mind that you're going to do this when you get out?
This was never my game plan.
So it just happened organically?
Yeah. I worked in the maintenance department while at Sing Sing while going to college.
Yeah.
And I was in charge of a 4-man crew and maintaining a 200-year-old building. And
Sure.
I was on call 24 hours a day, and I loved that work. I loved that job. I loved the responsibility. And I just thought, I can't wait to get out and have my own tools and my own crew.
Yeah.
And it didn't work out that way.
But you went to college while in prison, and then at some point, the pedal and tap were cut, right?
And then I ended
what
up going
happened then?
back to school on the outside, but the same program that had me the ability to go to school inside asked me to join the board of directors on the outside. So
that's interesting.
I joined the board of directors not to take over as director.
And they must have saw something in you to do that, right?
Well,
because a lot of people probably did what you did, right?
I would push back that not a lot of people did, but also when we were going to school, there was no one else. There was no one else that was out.
Right.
So when I was one of the first guys to go through the program, the college program, and get released, I was helping stuff envelopes. I was helping just with day-to-day office stuff. They actually, at that point, asked if I would join the board of directors to have a representative of someone that went through the program to also have some voice.
Right.
And then 2 years later, they asked me to take over as the director.
Right.
But you did talk about Brian Fisher and how could we bring college back? You kind of left that piece out.
These older guys pushed me to finish my high school diploma, pushed me to get into pre-college and then college. And then I never really felt I was doing it for myself. I was going to college for these guys. It was the only physical thing I could give my parents. In 1994, the funding for these programs was restricted, and all of a sudden they were taken away overnight. The guys at Sing Sing were brainstorming on the guys that already had their degrees. I had 118 credits and no degree. I never finished college.
Sure.
These guys that did finish said, "You don't understand what what you're missing. You didn't finish it." They started brainstorming just locally in the prison on how to create a college program in a maximum security prison.
And the warden obviously was very sympathetic to this.
He started coming down, was in the conversations.
Right.
We heard the women at Bedford Hills, the only max prison for women, had figured it out. And they had a consortium of colleges, and they created a college program.
Right.
They sent a playbook to the guys at Sing Sing, and then we created the program at Sing Sing called Hudson Link.
Right, which, again, I take my hat off to you and the warden and everybody who was in charge of that, because we realize how important education is in the prison system.
And then you attended Hudson Link as an inmate.
I went through the first class. I graduated in the first class.
Right.
And then after I graduated, the superintendent, Brian Fisher, asked if I would stay on and help run it. And then I learned about how to run a college program, how to work with corrections, became very close with the superintendent, and upon release, just stayed involved.
Gave you a sense of purpose, right?
Yeah.
Sense of meaning in your life? Yeah.
And that's when they asked you to join the board on the outside then?
Yeah.
Right, just to be
After
chronological.
release.
Right,
Yeah, I
gotcha.
graduated, stayed on to help run it. About 18 months later, walked out of prison. And then when I walked out, they asked me to join the board of directors.
Got it, okay. So you get out 16 years later, get paroled on Friday the 13th, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, your lucky day?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Of all days,
Really,
of all
after
days.
all these years, I'm getting out on the 13th.
On some level, though, you probably thought, well, you know what, this is interesting, it's in reverse. It's like, I finally got a stroke of good luck.
But that date was determined 2 decades before. That was on that computation sheet. That was planned. I knew that date.
Yeah.
So that was no surprise. I just was hoping to get out before that.
When you got out of prison, what was that like? Everybody was still around you? Did they receive you? You got out?
My family,
party?
my brothers, some neighbors, they all came up to the halfway house where I was getting paroled to.
Yeah.
And while everyone was so excited I was finally getting out, for me, I was not excited. All the guys we grew up
You
with.
you didn't deserve the adulation?
I was going to say that the guys we grew up with were coming back to prison in 6-8 months. So
Oh, right. Oh,
for
I
me
see.
to have been surrounded by guys that were smarter than me, that had their shit together, that
Yeah,
had good
sure.
family support, to
Right.
come back in 6-8 months, how was I not going to be that guy? And on top of that, I had been drug-free about 9 years before I walked out those doors. 8-9 years.
Yeah.
How was I going to maintain that sobriety? It just scared me to death.
Were there any people that received you badly? No?
No.
From the people you knew, everybody kind of warm welcome?
I mean, I didn't go back to
glad
the
you're home?
neighborhood, which
You
I
didn't
think
go-
is key. I feel like
Embarrassed?
I was embarrassed, but that wasn't
Yeah.
the reason, though. I feel like I watched a lot of men go back to the neighborhoods after 15, 18, 20 years, and the same people doing the same things are still there. So I was worried about my sobriety,
Yeah.
worried about going back to the neighborhood.
You have to go through some kind of detax program as well when you got out?
No, I was
When you got
drug-free
out.
for 9 years before I went out.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, good.
And there's no detox on the inside. You just do
Cold
it.
turkey.
Yeah,
do
sure.
it on your own.
Of course. Go ahead.
May I ask a
Yeah,
question?
you
No,
may.
Again, I don't want to supersede your host.
Come on, stop busting my balls. Just ask the question. Huh?
All right. So at some point, there was a transition from being the board member to another role they wanted you to take in Hudson Link. Could you discuss that?
Yeah, so I was home. I was working as a caseworker down in the city. I was doing substance abuse counseling for newly released state and federal prisoners. I was a board member, but offered to take over as the director because the organization had grown to the point where there was now 60 students, 1 college partner, 1 prison. They wanted a full-time director, and they asked if I would be willing to take that over.
It's interesting because I'm getting the full story and thankful to Jeff for filling in some of the blanks. They say that really one of the safest positions you could have in prison is to be a jailhouse lawyer because nobody fucks with you because everybody wants your help. But you're not a jailhouse lawyer, but you were extremely helpful to the prison population. So we can say
in charge of the wait list.
Right, and is it fair to say jailhouse lawyer and what Sean Pica did in prison?
Yeah.
Because that kind of sort of protected you on some level from other guys. You must have had enemies, right, in prison?
Not really.
Not really.
Even the guys.
But the other people you were helping, though, the old guard who had pushed you to go to prison, and the other people that you were helping, to the extent that any riffraff tried to come at you, they took care of that for you.
They were the movers and the shakers.
They took care of that for you.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
All right, so you had a little bit of a gang of your own in there that watched your back, right?
Yeah.
Fair to say, right?
Yeah.
So you get out, everybody receives you well, you don't go back home because you're a little embarrassed. Where did you go?
I went to a halfway house in Peekskill, right by the prison.
That's interesting.
Another crossover
Another
to
line,
me.
right?
Yes,
Because
I'm
he's
from
from Pica.
Peekskill, and my case happened there, yeah.
A quote, everyone else I knew who had gone home was returning to prison the first 6 to 8 months. You mentioned this already. How was I going to be any different? So you had the sense of like you probably will return back to prison again, right?
My game plan.
Was that the fear?
Yeah.
It was the fear.
And sobriety. My game plan.
But you were sober though.
I know, but how do you
felt-
maintain that?
Felt like you were going to go back on.
I had never been sober outside.
How old were you? You got released when you were 34,
33,
right?
34. I went in at 16. I came home when I was 33. And my only game plan was to get a job so I could eat.
You felt you can rely on the construction, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started doing
so
both.
was employment tough to find?
I started bussing tables.
Did they know or did they not know?
They did not know.
They didn't know, you didn't tell them.
There was no
And
background check
rightfully-
for that job.
And look, I understand why you didn't tell them. You know, it's tough to get a job. But you also said you had friends helping you with construction. You were helping friends out?
I got right into the trades in the city right away, and I was bussing tables at night and working in construction in the morning.
You must have felt like wow, I got a lot of work to do to catch up.
You got to make up. You got to try and make up some
for
time.
lost time,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. It's a quote from you. Some days I get on the train to go home, and man, I just cry and cry. It's overwhelming sometimes. Did you cry because of the time you lost, or for the acts you committed, or both?
Neither. Parole in New York allowed me, while I was still on parole, to work in an agency that counseled parolees.
Yeah.
Which is very innovative.
Yeah.
And I counseled newly released state and federal prisoners.
Right.
Every single day, people that had nothing, guys that I bidded with, I went home every day just completely ripped in half.
Ah, you poor bastard. On the spring day in '87, when Pica was sentenced to prison, his father, Sebastian, made a prediction in the hall outside the courtroom in Riverhead. Now, this is your biological father, right?
Yeah.
Sean said he'll make something of his life. So they really, really believed in you. And that's what we told him to do. We'll see when he comes out, when he comes home. We'll see when he comes. In other words, it's a declarative statement.
Yeah.
You guys will see the moment he gets out, he's going to do something good. And you did. And I applaud you. When it's you and your thoughts at night, you're ready to hit the bed, there still is something tugging at you, right?
Sure, I ripped my family in half.
Yeah. You got a new family?
Yeah.
You got married? You still same woman, Lori?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 15
Children?
years? No.
No children.
We both got married late in life.
Got it. Moving on to, so Sean Pica came home. He had done what his father said, known as a number in the New York State prison. You remember the number?
87B 0811.
0811?
0811.
0811. It says 811 here. Okay.
Oh, you know why? Because if there's a 0 as the first, they could drop it.
Oh, I see. I got you. Okay.
811, yeah.
Pica managed to make something of his life, and I applaud you. You got your high school equivalency diploma in Suffolk County Jail, sent to prison upstate, here in a bachelor's degree in organizational management and a master's degree in professional services. He has counseled high school and college kids for the past 10 years. Have you ever get notes and letters from these kids they keep up and say? And that must be very rewarding, right? Yeah. Pica lived his last 7 years behind bars in Sing Sing on cell block A, the largest in the world and one of the toughest. It breaks a lot of guys, you say.
Yeah.
Didn't break you?
Not yet.
Break you. After he was paroled, he spent a couple of months in Catholic Charities Halfway House in Peekskill, like we said. Then he got a job as a counselor in East Harlem for Strive, a nonprofit, you know it?
I do.
A nonprofit agency that helps ex-convicts, troubled kids, welfare recipients, and others get and keep jobs and to change their attitudes, which is a really big thing, right?
Yeah.
Attitude has a lot.
I'm still involved with them.
You're still good for you. So at the time, you lived with an aunt and uncle in Pleasantville?
Yeah.
And while you're going through all this whole, just kind of reintegrating, and
I was in the halfway house for about 5 months and then moved with my aunt and uncle, and then I got my own place.
Right, and I got to mention this because it just rubs me the wrong way. You had programs to help you when you got out of prison, right?
Yes.
And that doesn't rub me the wrong way. It rubs me the wrong way that exonerees have no fucking programs.
It makes no sense at all.
And it's just batshit crazy.
Yeah.
I just don't understand.
I walked out with medical, housing, stipends, food. I walked out with all these things to help me get on my feet.
Yeah.
And now
jeez.
someone that served the same time as me gets nothing.
Right. You went through, was it some kind of a Catholic seminary school or something? Was there a goal of you to become, go into the priesthood at all or no?
No. When I finished, I got my 2-year from Ulster County Community College inside. I got my 4-year from Nyack College on the inside. And I got my master's from New York Theological Seminary on the inside. It was the only graduate program in the prison. I'd never had a desire to become clergy. However, on the outside, I went for my master's in social work at Hunter College.
Right.
And all of those things were related in a way that really made the drive to become a counselor.
Was religion a big part of your life for growing up?
Yeah.
It was?
Yeah.
Right, so...
Irish kids in Long Island, are you kidding me?
Right. Do you still fall back on it on some level? or
Yeah.
no?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you believe in God and all
Yeah,
that stuff,
yeah.
right? Which I find fascinating, particularly with exonerees because of what they've done. But a
Yeah.
lot of exonerees still believe in God.
Yeah, I do.
You feel indebted to Hudson Link and you want to pay it forward, and you have done, right?
Yeah.
Many times over, right?
Yeah.
Because you really give yourself, you have continued to give yourself selflessly, right?
When I got in the program, there were 16 students. When I took over as a director, there were 60 students. Now, a few years later, there's 644 men and women in the program in 6 prisons.
That's amazing.
And
That's
how many prisons
amazing.
did it expand in?
We're now in 6 different prisons, 9 different college partners.
That is amazing. And
Contrast it with how many to start?
Oh, well, just the one.
Just
Yeah,
one?
just one.
Wow,
No.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's
I remember that,
incredible.
and I remember watching the video, and I remember in the video you also mentioned $1.5 million you raised
Yeah, we don't get
at
any
that
state
particular
of
time.
no state of federal funding. I raise about 1.8 million privately every year.
There's an amazing stat. I want you to give it, though. The national recidivism rate versus the recidivism rate for prisoners in college, and then the stat specifically as to Hudson Link.
Got it. So we have 68% of the men and women in this country that go to prison return to prison in the first 3 years.
Okay.
New York has a 43% rate of the men and women that return to prison. Hudson Link has a less than 1% recidivism rate in 20 years.
That's incredible.
Let's talk a little bit about Hudson Link.
Okay.
So you're a big supporter of it, and from what I understand, you're also a financial supporter.
On my own modest level. Go ahead, you can share. You
it's
can
a-
share.
I mean,
How
we-
much money do you dole out to Hudson
Oh,
Link?
you don't gotta go there. I think for me, I was involved for a long time before I became the director.
Right.
So when I became the director and now had access to the finances, aunts, uncles, my parents, my friends, who's been donating, and it just blew my mind how many folks in my circle were actually supporting the work that I was involved in. Then I became the director, and we have a lot of people that give $50, $100 every year.
Right.
And that makes, no, don't get me wrong, we have people that give more too, but to have that wide base of people giving that amount from around the world now is just, for me, so humbling.
Yeah.
I love giving them money, like a controlled amount, but I love doing, you know why? Because I felt like, I feel like I had so much less ground to cover
Yeah.
when I was released, having gotten the associate's degree from college, albeit the state paying for it, not Hudson Link, and the other year towards that. And I feel like if there wasn't a college education program, I would have had to travel that much longer.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know that I would have made the journey.
Yeah.
So Hudson Link is opening that door.
Yeah.
For people, and I love being a part of that, and you know it's one of the, you got to come with me this summer to the graduation, 2 events for Hudson.
Anything this guy is part of, I want to be a part
Graduation, the graduation program in Hudson Link and Sing Sing, their gala event, both of those are really moving experience. You know, the graduates are still involved.
Yeah, sure.
You know, that's a big part of it for me. I
We've
love
had
the
some
camaraderie.
amazing speakers.
You know?
Tim Robbins, Ice-T, Harry
Wow.
Belafonte, Whoopi,
That's
Steve
amazing.
Forbes,
That's amazing.
Julian Bond, Ozzy
How'd you
Davis.
get these people on? They just
I
know
just
the work
call.
you do?
I
You
just call.
Good for you. And so you mentioned something interesting. So it was heartwarming. It must have been heartwarming to see after you became a director, you see who was putting 50 here, 100 here. And they were like people that you grew up with, friends and stuff like that you could, so you're like, wow, you didn't even know about that,
All
right?
the old girlfriend.
Wow, no kidding, that's great.
Sorry.
I love the sense of people giving without asking anything in return.
Yeah.
I love seeing people take advantage of opportunity and seize it and then do something with it. You know, none of the men or women who come through Hudson Link are satisfied with living just a normal, everyday, average life. They all want to make something, and they are making something
An
of
interesting
themselves.
piece, too, is there are programs like ours across the country. Not many of them, there's a few of them.
Yeah.
Most of them will only take a student that has one foot out the door, certain crimes, certain time. We proudly take every single student that has a desire to go to college. And that means some of them that are never coming home.
Right.
And we also have the only degree-granting college program in a prison in the country that's run, staffed, and coordinated by formerly incarcerated people.
That's great.
So
That makes a
having
difference.
the
wonderful.
team that have been through
Yeah.
it, sat in those seats, now coming back into the prison, has been life-changing.
Yeah. Did you get any troubled students in prison and now in Hudson Link, where they're a little bit rambunctious, they're a little bit harder to deal
Yeah,
with?
well, you just described every college class in the world.
Yeah, but these are people getting out of prison. I mean, this a little different, no?
There's no difference. We deliver the same textbooks, services,
No,
professors.
but what I'm just saying, just on like maybe they can't get something down and they lash out, they get frustrated. You never felt that.
Well,
I've
isn't
been
there
there.
like a sense of community? Because like when I was going to
Yeah,
college, there was
yeah.
a sense of community, and I didn't have to know you or
The
even
same way the
like
guys
you
helped me.
to tutor me
Yeah.
and make a verbal intervention.
Yeah.
Just settle down. Look, you got this. Let me
We
help
just
you.
celebrated our 20th anniversary. There
Wow.
has never
That's amazing.
been an incident in a classroom, ever.
That is amazing.
And many of the people who are in prison still that graduated, there is a way in which they stay involved with the program.
So the sense of community is almost as important.
And so I'll share with you, Tom. So there's some people that are associated with Hudson Link that have graduated that continue to be involved while they're on the inside.
Yeah.
And I knew them either from when I was in Sing Sing or in other parts of my time from other prisons. And so when I go to the graduation,
Yeah.
I look those people just on a human thing. That's my visitation of them.
He lights up when he talks about this.
Well,
I love
at the
to
last
see.
graduation, I was with one of the guys, and Jermaine, you went to introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Jeff. And he says, I know who you are, Jeff. 'Cause
Yes.
there's so few people that fight for those that left behind that Jeff's name is very well known.
Yeah. You're married, Lori. You've been successful marriage.
Yeah.
No
15
kids.
years.
And what was it like when you guys met? Right? You didn't tell her right away.
I told her pretty close to meeting her.
Wow. So you're a straight shooter. You want to get it out
well,
of the way.
at what point does it turn into a lie? Right?
That's
So
very interesting. Great
when
perspective.
I met her and we had a date, dinner and a movie, I thought it went really well. In my mind, if she finds out after that she dated someone that had a homicide, is it scary? I don't know. I had never been through this before. I'd never been on parole before. I'd never really dated before. Like, this was all new territory, and I had a 8 p.m. curfew. You had to get the date over with. So I just told her right after that first date, and she was okay with that. Her dad was a cop too, and we had a lot of common family stuff, and we dated for about a year, and then we got married.
So she didn't receive it. I mean, it must have been a little bit of a taken aback, right? At least.
I told her the story, and then she Googled it, and she came up with the same stuff. So my story matched what she Googled, which I think put her at ease a little bit.
Right. Also, really a true testament to the love she has for you, because maybe some girls would be like, I don't know if I want to get involved with this guy. Let me take a hike, find somebody else who hasn't
And also
killed
her
somebody.
parents. It's one thing for her to care for me, having her father say, hey, I really like you, even though you spent 2 decades in prison, here's my daughter's hand.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a conversation to have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny. I spoke to somebody. You have any regrets?
Oh,
You have any regrets?
Where do I fucking begin? Are you kidding me?
Well, you obviously regret killing him. Do you?
I regret. There's a million.
I'm asking you this for a very specific reason.
Yeah.
And after meeting with you, I'm even more convinced. But I spoke to somebody who knows you, and they claimed...
Mrs. Bonanno from the homeroom teacher?
No. And they claimed that you told them that you don't resent killing him.
I absolutely. I absolutely wish I hadn't done that.
You regret that you did what you did.
I mean, on the one hand, as a mixed-up kid with no direction in his life, I probably wouldn't be the executive director of a national nonprofit.
It shaped your life.
I feel like it shaped my life in a positive way that I didn't have before.
You wish that you got there through another route?
Through the 9 different max prisons I lived in? Probably not.
That somebody's life wasn't lost. Of course you wish that.
You can't close your eyes any night and not see that person's face. If you think you can pull the trigger and end someone's life and not deeply regret it internally.
You envision the body on the driveway.
Over and over.
Wow. Every
day. I could
day.
describe it in detail like it happened 12 minutes ago.
Wow.
It is not something I recommend that you ever try.
Right. And now, even after all these years, you don't have any desire to talk to Cheryl or Rob?
No.
No.
Nope. Even with the People magazine interview, we did them separately. She lived her life separately from mine.
Yeah. Is that something you need to discuss with her to sort of put some kind of period at the end of the sentence? No, huh? That doesn't, no. And she doesn't feel a sense that she has to do that with you either.
I think I'd be more worried that the story would change at this point. In my head, I got through everything I went through to this date with a story of how things unfolded. What if that story starts to change?
How would it change?
That maybe her father wasn't doing what he was accused of doing.
Wow.
I don't want to live with that.
Wow.
I've justified a lot of things.
That's a pretty big thing to say, though, about Cheryl.
Well, there's a lot of people that have said that. So for me, I'm just saying, I'm just voicing what's already been said. But
so is there a fear that you might sit down and have a conversation, and then she turns to you in privacy and say, you know what, I got to tell you the truth, none of that shit happened?
I just feel like, why would I put myself in that position?
Right, but there is the fear, though. There is the fear that she might say something like that.
I just don't see why I would even ask the question.
Right, but you're not answering my question. Is there the fear that she might?
I think for me, surviving those years,
right,
like I said, not having that certain luxuries, I never confronted anybody unless I thought there could be a positive resolution.
Right.
Not that everyone was positive, but if I went into a situation, I would not confront Jeff if I thought, I know there's not going to be anything positive behind it.
Yeah, sure.
Why would I sit with her and talk to her about what happened 30 years ago? In your head, I think you're thinking that I need that period at the end. I absolutely can't imagine.
No, I know you don't, because if you don't do it with your parents, you're surely not going to do it with Cheryl.
Yeah.
I get that.
That's just how I operate.
Sure.
Is it a similar line of reasoning that you apply in your own mind as to whether you ever were tempted to, talk to a member of, Cheryl's father was married, or just, somebody else in the family? I was
only in communication with her and Rob throughout the whole thing, and then even after I went to prison, only Cheryl was writing me.
But I mean now.
I can't even envision a conversation I would want to have with a family member about something that happened 30 years ago.
Okay.
There is absolutely, anyone that tells you you need to get it out so it doesn't fester inside you has no idea what they're talking about.
Well, wait a minute, time out. Look, forget about anybody that tells you, any psychologist or psychiatrist, this is just textbook psychology.
Then they got
so you can't say they have no idea what they're talking about.
I absolutely can, because you're telling me that it's better to get this out.
No. What I think is that you're just an isolated case. Okay. I'm saying for many others, like Jeff, like me, like many others, I'm a firm believer that if you got this thing festering inside of you, it's going to manifest itself on your body physically somewhere, whether it's cancer, heart attacks, or whatever it might be. So in your case, okay, if you're telling me...
I came to terms with it in a different way.
Yeah, everybody has their own, way of dealing with things. So I would say to you, just as from one human being to another, that maybe it's something you should revisit, you and your thoughts, and kind of say, well, maybe, Tom, let me think it over. Maybe there is some validity there, but, and you can revisit it and say, no, I was right to begin with. I don't need to have these conversations.
I would just say...
I'm just saying from
bringing up the worst thing you've ever done in your entire life, in conversation is already pretty tricky with strangers.
Right.
With family members, it's a whole different kind of tricky. I've moved on.
Good, and I'm glad you have. What did we learn today? Did we learn anything?
That Sean's a little crazy.
We're wrapping up. We've got a couple minutes left. Under the most severe circumstance, do you think you can be capable to do it all over again?
I would never hurt someone
I'm
again.
talking about severe. Let's say somebody hurt Lori. No?
I would never hurt someone again. I've never even had a fist fight after that.
Right. How about for $1 million?
All right, we have to have a different show for that one. But that's a year budget for me. But I think...
so for $10 million, you would do it.
Unfortunately, there's a ripple effect to every action that we have. And I didn't understand that as a kid.
Right.
It's not just about can you pull the trigger and hurt somebody.
I understand that.
It just hurts everyone else around you.
But how meaningful do you feel like your life is? The fact that you're involved in this type of work, which makes such a tremendous difference in everyone's life, as opposed to you doing some other run-of-the-mill, non-distinguishable,
I can't wait to...
essential 9-to-5 job, just a regular cog amongst the huge wheels.
I, like you, cannot wait to get to work in the morning. In fact, it's not even work. I don't even feel like I have a job.
That's great.
The fact that I have a paycheck just blows my mind. All I do is travel the country promoting a program that gave me a second chance at life. I know I wouldn't be here right now wearing a fancy suit if it wasn't for this program. But I also had dinner at the White House last year with the president. I mean, like, there are things that have happened since then that are still have me just so humbled to have been in this opportunity, but I've dedicated my life when I walked out those doors, those gates, to helping others, and I've continued with that dedication.
All I ask of you is for you to prove these words are true. You better lunch to show consideration. To listen to my point of view, you better learn to show consideration. You should have learned to show consideration.